Welcome back. You're watching HFO-TV.
Welcome back to HFO-TV. I'm Greg Frick, partner at HFO Investment Real Estate. Today we have Christian Kaylor, State of Oregon economist. Going to hear him talk a little bit about some of the new numbers that are in and what's going on in the economy, which we've all seen has been very hot, especially in our part of the world. So thanks for coming back again. It's always a pleasure. Maybe you can give a little update on kind of what you're seeing in your world and some of the changes that we have seen in the last year.
Well, 2017 is continuing to just be an excellent year for job growth in Oregon. We're getting in the final revised data for 2017. We're seeing that Portland is the 8th fastest growing metro area in the United States for job creation, tied with Raleigh. And just behind Seattle. And so it's been an excellent, the last 5 years have been excellent. Portland and the state of Oregon, last year Oregon was the 2nd fastest growing state in the country for job creation.
Growth?
Yeah.
Wow.
And over the last 5 years we've been the 6th fastest for the whole last 5 years, which have been a historic job growth era for the United States, and Oregon's absolutely.
Has Oregon ever been in that ranking for that length of time? I mean,
the 90s were good. I want to say the 90s were good. I haven't looked at where our rankings were, but I think the tech boom, coming out of the 80s, which were very rough on Oregon with timber.
Right.
Tech kind of saved Oregon from oblivion there. And so, you saw communities like Hillsborough double in population from 1990 to 2000. So yeah, tech in the 90s was very, very good for Oregon, but I don't know that we were that high up as we are now.
And is that job growth, is it spread out in different industries, or is there still, are we a little bit more diversified than we were when we came out of the timber and back in the high tech thing? Is it?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we're seeing is diversity. We are becoming sort of uniquely a city that is higher wage on average as we develop more of a professional global services economy.
Right.
So we have IT obviously, but also architects, engineers, advertising, marketing, professional business services that pay very well with clients all over the world. Whether that's, again, advertising, architecture, engineering, legal services, whatever those look like. That's the type of thing you associate with a bigger city, something like a New York or a Boston or a Chicago, the sort of corporate office activity.
College educated, corporate office, yeah.
Yeah, and so Portland's sort of developing that, which is really good for diversifying the economy overall, and is going to help us, again, in the 1990s with tech, we got so into tech that when the tech bubble popped in 2000, 2001, Oregon had the highest unemployment rate every month in 2002.
Yeah, I remember that, yes.
So, again, part of that was because we didn't have a very diverse economy, because we were so dependent on high-tech manufacturing, which was great. It was great to have it in the 90s, but when it turned down, it really hurt Oregon overall. Now, having a more diverse economy, I'm feeling better. I don't know when the next recession is going to be. I don't know what it's going to look like. But when it happens, and it will eventually happen, I'm more optimistic that Portland will be able to weather that storm because we have a more diverse, globally competitive, sort of professional.
Not so dependent on one industry, so to speak. It's like the timber, we've gone through the timber thing, we've gone through the high-tech manufacturing, it's diverse enough to...
Yeah, timber in the 80s, 82, 83 was extremely hard on the state of Oregon because we were so into timber manufacturing. And not just the manufacturing, that was more of statewide activity, but in Portland you had Weyerhaeuser, Willamette Industries, you had Pope and Talbot. So a lot of the corporate activities around buying and selling timber, shipping it, milling it,
based out of here.
Based out of Portland. And that hurt Portland really badly in the 80s, that dependence on timber. And then we sort of traded that for tech. That's still there, and I think that's going to be pretty solid for a while. But again, I think that diversity is good that we're seeing in the growth.
And are we seeing, I'm assuming we're seeing this kind of growth nationally, based a lot on the West Coast. Were there any other surprises that you saw as you're looking at the numbers?
When you look at just the national map, what we're seeing is the West Coast doing very, very well for job growth. And so some of what Portland is enjoying is sort of a really nice placement where Seattle is one of the fastest growing regions of the country for job growth. The Bay Area, San Francisco, even as crowded and the traffic issues the Bay Area is seeing, still excellent job growth, excellent population growth numbers. But the traffic and particularly the housing costs not just the housing, the commercial real estate costs are
Right.
just so high
Yeah.
that when businesses in the Bay Area or Seattle look to grow, Portland looks really, really good for a cost basis.
Well, we're still the cheapest, so to speak, up when you look at the major metropolitan areas on the West Coast. I mean, we're still the cheapest. I know we've had a lot of growth here, a lot of rent growth, a lot of single-family appreciation, but when you look relative to Seattle, San Francisco, even LA, parts of LA, we are still relatively the cheapest.
Well, and we're cheap, but we still have the available workforce that a corporate company is going to need. So I being an Oregonian and kind of traveling in Oregon, looking at these issues, I go to places like Eugene or Medford or Bend, and they sort of say, we're even less expensive than Portland. But if you look at the actual numbers, the Portland metro region has 40,000 IT workers. Which is still a fraction of what you see in Seattle or the Bay Area, but places like Eugene or Medford, they literally don't have the workforce that a corporation would look for if they wanted to put a branch office in the West Coast.
So they're going to end up in Portland.
Portland has a large enough skilled workforce at a low price that we're really ideally situated for job growth.
So that's what's kind of fueled this wage inflation? Is it based more on the upper end as opposed to you hear about the shrinking middle?
Right.
I mean, we seeing that within Portland too?
Yeah, although that has diminished somewhat. Healthcare has actually had a great couple of years, and that tends to be a little more middle of the range.
Okay.
Typically nurses make about $80,000 to $90,000 a year is good. And with construction booming, you see a lot of jobs paying $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. Don't have to go to college to do some pretty basic framing or roofing, and you can be making middle class income in this economy. Again, we'll see how long that lasts with this real estate boom, but some of that is middle class as well. So it's right now it's in all three areas, but coming out of the recession, 2012, 2013, 2014, the early days, it was disproportionately the higher end.
Right.
Yeah.
So now it's kind of trickled down, or you're seeing it more diverse again.
It is much more diverse, which is good. Our unemployment rate's 3.7%. I mean, I've been in this job, it'll be 18 years next month. I didn't believe that would be possible for us to have a 3.7% unemployment rate. So I think, we're in a rarefied economic situation, and I think some of the rules around what we've seen are, the rule book almost goes out the window on some things when you get a 3.7% unemployment rate.
Right.
And you're going to see incredible wage pressure in things like construction, and not just construction.
Which we've already seen. We've already seen in the construction side.
We're not seeing construction, but I think, just in the last 2 days, I've talked to HR managers at two different companies, and one of them was healthcare, and I'm trying to remember what the other one was, and they're seeing incredible wage pressure, and they're having trouble keeping up, and it's tough all over. Once you get to 3.7%, it's absolutely a seller's market.
Right.
The seller's having the work, and if an employer wants to hire, forget it. And again, that pressure is even worse in places like Seattle and the Bay Area. And if you have direct flights to Portland, which we do,
Yep.
Great access there. They can just hop in a plane. It's a 45-minute flight from Seattle to Portland. We're really ideally situated to sort of capture that and still be relatively low cost.
Do you see other metros kind of on the West Coast kind of maybe benefiting from that as we get wage inflation? Or you think you're going to see employers, are they going to look in Eugene? Are they going to look in Spokane, Boise? You hear a lot about Salt Lake City. Did the numbers bear that out, or is there still?
I think Eugene and Spokane, Medford, Ashland, a lot of those places are just really still too small.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be too small to be competitive nationally. Boise, I would very much look at Boise. Salt Lake City as well. Both of those are smaller than Portland. They're noticeably smaller, but they're not that much smaller. I mean, Eugene is much smaller. Medford is much smaller. Even Bend, and Spokane's fairly remote. So I think that there are some great opportunities in there, and I would absolutely look at Las Vegas as well, which is booming. It's the fastest growing metro in the United States.
It is now.
But it's almost all low end. It's almost all
service
jobs, and so they're growing incredibly quickly. And I would think at some point someone would realize that you can get really good office space in Las Vegas. It's a nice place to live. It's a great economic environment. They've got an airport, just a little small. I mean, there's some constraints in there. But I think a lot of places like that are still actually being overlooked in some ways.
Do they have the educated workforce that the current, that's?
No, in fact, Las Vegas is probably the least educated workforce of any metro area in the United States. And that's saying something. I think it's down around 20% of the adult population has a bachelor's degree compared to about 40% in Portland. Seattle may be the best educated
in the United States.
Behind San Francisco, Bay Area. I mean, those are the top two best educated regions in the United States. Seattle and the Bay Area. Something like 50, 55, 60% of the population having a bachelor's degree. Las Vegas is the other end of the spectrum. But again, I feel like that shows the opportunity.
Right.
That is, housing is still affordable there, and they have some of the infrastructure. It feels like they can only go up in terms of income level, which would mean price pressure on real estate.
Right.
One would think. So yeah.
That's the way it's supposed to work, but one never knows. I'm curious, what in terms of, do you see in, I know you were at the state of Oregon, does the state, do they recognize that this is, I don't want to say it's a bubble, but kind of a unique situation in terms of the affordability issues and the demand and the wage inflation that this, we're benefiting with the proximity to Seattle, proximity to San Francisco, but if there's some benefits that we have, but if we lose those economic benefits, that could, turn the spigot off a little bit, and we may, I'm always concerned about policies that are put in place during these times, which then may, again, it's a cyclical economy.
Well, I think, when you talk about the state of Oregon, I think it's tough because you can't, I believe, speak of the state of Oregon as an economic unit.
Yeah, right.
So what's going on in Portland is just so dramatically different from what's going on in, say, Roseburg. And I pick on Roseburg a lot. Well, but it's in Oregon.
Right.
And so when people come to me and they say, hey, how's the Oregon economy look? I sort of go, well, the state is 300 miles tall and 400 miles wide. I mean, it's a big state. So the issues in Portland probably aren't very correlated with the issues in Klamath Falls or something. And Douglas County is where Roseburg is, 125,000 people, 100,000. But Roseburg's 22,000 people. It's the biggest city in Douglas County. Douglas County has fewer jobs today than they had 15 years ago.
So they haven't benefited from this economic growth. Okay. Now, does Washington and Seattle have that same, or is Washington bigger where it's a little bit more spread out of other metropolitan areas? Yeah,
I mean, I haven't looked at Washington State as closely, and I think that's a really interesting point. I think rural Oregon is very rural. Whereas I think rural Washington still has communities like Spokane and Wenatchee, Kirkland. It has some activities outside of the Seattle area.
Right.
Economic activities to a degree that in Oregon, once you get outside of the Portland area, it's tougher to see that sort of level of economic activity that rural Washington still has. So I don't know. I haven't looked closely at those numbers, but I think that's an interesting point. But along the Columbia Gorge, it feels like Washington State is a little more affluent than Oregon on the.
Yeah, we almost feel more if we compare to Washington a lot, I almost feel sometimes we're almost more comparable like in Idaho, where you've got Boise as a driver, but then once you go outside of Boise, it's not there.
And Idaho's a great example. Yeah, once you get outside of Boise, Idaho is not doing well economically,
right.
But Boise is great. And again, I think, great quality of life, great weather. Affordable housing, I think, if I was looking at a map of the United States and you said, where do you want to invest? I would absolutely look at Boise.
Yeah, okay. Any metropolitan areas surprise you? Any states surprise you in terms of job growth? And I know Texas had 3 of the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, Texas, in some ways it surprises me. And I've never really been to Texas, so I shouldn't say anything.
Right.
But given the climate, literally the climate in Texas, their rapid population growth still surprised me. We're seeing Arizona come down a little bit in the last few years, not booming like it used to. New Mexico really struggling. So I'm surprised that Texas is doing this, and say New Mexico, we're not seeing as much job growth there for whatever reason. And with the flooding and the heat waves, I understand why people wouldn't want to necessarily live in Texas. So I'm always sort of mystified by that, but I've been mystified by Texas for 20 years in this job, and they're just doing great.
They've always seemed like such a boom and bust. They're just, Texas, and same with Phoenix, always seem like such a roller coaster. When it's high, it's going, and then when it comes, it really drops off.
Well, and Texas did get affected by, it's a globally competitive communities in Dallas and Houston and San Antonio and Austin, but it still has a fairly strong reliance on oil.
Right.
And so when oil prices went down a few years ago, I think that did hurt them to some degree. And so now they're starting to come up with the oil prices as well, but they're not dependent on oil. The same way Oklahoma, West Virginia, the Dakotas are very dependent on oil prices. You can just about measure their economic growth
based on the price of oil.
just looking at the price of oil. I mean, that they live and die by that type of stuff. It's pretty crazy.
Then let's go back to Oregon and kind of Portland with the affordability. Now that we're expecting, with the job growth that we've had, the low inflation, we are going to start seeing some more severe, probably wage inflation across different industries now. And then that brings into, is that going to maybe limit or lessen some of the affordability? Is that going to push it up as people have more income to spend, driving up housing?
Part of my sense is that the bottom of the recession was probably about early 2010, and since then, we've had some really good job growth. I feel like the real estate market, you know more about this than I do, but from the amount of time it takes a business to say, we're doing well, let's hire somebody,
right,
to the time they get somebody in the door and they're sitting down and they've been hired, you're talking about a process of months. Mm-hmm. You can't do it immediately, but you're talking about a process of months.
Unless you're Amazon, then you do it.
Yeah, you can do it. I mean, if you have enough money, you can do it really fast. But that takes months to hire somebody. If you're looking at real estate and you say, I want to build an apartment building, I want to build a condo, and you make that decision, from the time you decide to do that, all the steps you have to go through of getting the financing and buying the property and the permits
yep,
and lining up the contractors and getting cranes, I hear, is a thing these days too, is a hassle. You're talking about years,
yep, from
the time you decide to build housing till the time you can give somebody the keys to their new apartment. And I think that's what happened in 2011, 12, 13, and 14, is that we were creating jobs faster than we could create the new housing.
Oh, definitely.
And so that's where a lot of the price pressure came from. I think now to some degree that's coming into some equilibrium.
Yes.
And so as the housing folks have sort of figured this out, and I know I have a lot of conversations with people, they see all these cranes in Portland and they go, oh man, this looks like 2007 again to us. And I go, I think we're still backfilling the demand from the job creation that we've enjoyed. 90,000 jobs created just in Multnomah County
which
in
is
the last
a huge
8
number.
years. Huge number. Another 90,000 in Washington and Clackamas combined. And that doesn't even include Southwest Washington or the more outlying areas. You're looking at least 200, almost 250,000 jobs created in 9 years. There's no way we've created 250,000 housing units in Portland in the last 9 years.
No.
So I still think there's plenty of demand for housing out there, even now. And so having those cranes out there on the horizon, it makes me feel better that we're going to get to some sort of equilibrium. But when those housing prices were really going up, 2015, 2016, I think that was that disequilibrium.
Yes.
With just, the contractors couldn't get up to speed as fast as the businesses could hire. Now I think we're roughly in some sort of equilibrium with that.
Getting, at least feels like we're heading that direction.
Yeah, that we're not going to see 10, 20% annual rent increases. And so, maybe 5%, something a little more reasonable. But again, that's just a lag issue. And again, they could work the other way on construction, where you can imagine businesses shedding employees faster than contractors can sort of, delay their projects. But again, Portland's diversity of who we're doing for job growth. In the late 90s, it was just so disproportionately high-tech manufacturing. And then that got hit harder than any other industry in America in 2001. Now, I think we're really diversifying the Portland economy overall, which makes me feel more optimistic that we won't be the first in, last out of the recession.
Right, exactly. Or subject to a, kind of like a Phoenix overbuild, this roller coaster. We'd say to PI, I tell people, if you looked at the numbers, from an economist, we should have been building like crazy in 11 and 12 and 13.
That's right.
And then the other thing on this recession, it was also a financial issue where we had a lot of lenders took a lot of time before they would start putting money back into the new construction business. Limited number of developers, because a lot of them got wiped out, so you're very limited. So what we should have been doing in 11, 12, 13 delayed, so now we have this been up demand, and we're kind of, like you said, we're catching up.
Yeah.
Which is why I always kind of think we may be in this a little bit longer than, because we get asked, what inning are we in? Are we in the third, and I said, well, this may go a little longer because we didn't jump back in quite the way we typically do when we get out of these, coming out of a recession. We didn't go full force. It was kind of a slow ramp up.
Well, but it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy. 3.7% unemployment rate that we have right now.
Right.
I mean, we've been adding, on average, 30,000 jobs a year the last 5 years, the Portland regional economy. And again, we're not adding 30,000 units of housing every year. But the only way we can do that at 3.7% is to bring in people from outside of Portland. And people love to move to Portland, so that's not a problem. But if we don't have the housing units for them, that could slow the overall economic growth. That could be our constraint.
Which then like I said, you start losing your economic benefit versus Seattle, San Francisco, LA, and they're looking at other areas if we can't keep up with housing.
Yeah, and again, I'd look at Boise, Salt Lake City, and even Las Vegas. And I understand people not wanting to get into Las Vegas real estate. I mean, there's been a lot of drama there over the years, but I feel like over time though they're gonna, again, they're so cheap for what they've got. I can't imagine it won't go up at some point.
Well, thank you again for coming. It was great, very informative.
Yeah,
we'll see you again on next time on HFO TV. Perfect. Thanks, buddy.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information.